Welcome to our web exclusive. I'm Mike Montecalvo, along with Eyewitness News analyst Lieutenant General Reginald Centracchio. We'll get to the unrest in Syria, and also, General, we're seeing statistics of violent crime going down across the country, but police deaths going up. We'll talk about that too in just a second. Let's talk about what's going on in North Korea. As of this taping on Wednesday, we're finding out that they have fueled up, which possibly could be a rocket that will be launched on Thursday. They claim they're injecting the fuel on Tuesday and Wednesday, so there's a time frame there, correct? Once they put that into the air.
There's a two-step method to a liquid fuel rocket. The liquid is already in the major component of the rocket. When you introduce into that a catalyst, which is corrosive in nature, that gives you a 5-day window where you either have to launch it or defuel it. So I think if they start to inject that catalyst, that gives us a good indication that tomorrow, certainly either tomorrow or by Saturday, that rocket will have to be launched.
Okay, we're calling it a rocket, we're calling it a missile test. They're not calling it that. They're calling it a satellite. And why do you think the different terminology?
Well, I think they want to ensure that the world opinion is on their side in reference to using it as a satellite vehicle to introduce a satellite into the orbit around the Earth. That was done several times before. I think one time they were successful, the other time they were not. But the difference is the terminology. A rocket is a rocket. And to get a piece of hardware into space, it could be a satellite or it could be a nuclear weapon. To change from that configuration on the rocket to actually house a nuclear weapon in a warhead is very short time frame in reference to making it happen.
This is a long-range rocket we're talking about here. How far do you think the distance could be? Could it be the United States?
Yes, absolutely. This particular rocket has a range that would definitely take it into Alaska, certainly the Hawaiian Islands, and many other places around Europe, specifically in Asia itself, within U.S. interest. But specifically within Alaska, definitely, and Hawaiian Islands, and perhaps some of the West Coast too.
Well, Kim Jong-un has obviously taken over power now. It's been since about 4 months since his father passed on. And they're doing a lot of events in North Korea. This is one of the marquee events. And they've actually let journalists go into the country to see what they're doing. So that's kind of the sticky thing here. They're launching what they're claiming is a satellite, but journalists are actually seeing what's going on.
That's true. And once again, they're taking advantage of the journalists being there to look at it from their point of view. Their point of view is it's a peaceful satellite insertion to bolster their economy. We are, the West, looking at it as a possible first step to developing a nuclear weapon capability to be delivered by that particular rocket.
Their economy is awful. How would this...
It is, and that's a good point. You know, the agreement was by the United Nations some months ago that we would give them nutritional value foods and stuff, providing they would not violate this agreement by launching a missile. And I think that would negate the agreement, and once again you're back to square one as we were several months ago when they were starting to say how bad they were with the amount of people who were starving and they needed food. This will unfortunately set us back several years.
Well, he's got a new title too, General. They're calling him now the first secretary of the ruling Workers' Party. It's kind of a new post, but basically he's in charge. Do you think this is all happening to show that even though he's one of the youngest leaders now in the world, that how much control he has over the military and the country?
Well, I think he'd like to see that be perceived by the rest of the world. Nevertheless, he is so young that he doesn't have, I believe, the kind of technical expertise to make the decision to launch that missile or not. And he's being given much guidance, I'm sure, by the military. And he's not going to take on the military at this point. He's probably gotten a lot of guidance as to we need to do this to ensure that you look like you're in charge, but we really are going to make the decision.
Well, you can. This is setting up for a movie. You can see, let's just hypothetically, down the road, 4 or 5 years from now, he realizes he doesn't want to take the country this way, that he wants to be more democratic and wants to make the country friendly with everyone else. But now he has given the military so much power, since they're calling the shots, they could easily take him out and put somebody else in there.
Hypothetically, he could be on board one of those missiles as part of the payload. I think when you look at the real fine line between establishing his authority versus the military, without the military and the elite within North Korea, he wouldn't be in power anyway. So I think it's a real fine line that he's trying to negotiate, and it could turn on him real quickly.
Well, the launch is the third attempt, I believe, since 1998, General. What's the UN and the U.S.'s response to this, or what is it going to be?
Well, Hillary Clinton has already said that if this launch goes off, it will undoubtedly violate the agreement the United Nations Security Council had, and it would exacerbate the tension within that region. So I think the West is looking at it as certainly a step where they're trying to develop the capability to develop the missile itself and a warhead to go on it. If we look at the historical actions that North Korea has done over the last 10 to 15 years, this will be followed by some kind of test to determine they do have a nuclear capability. The several tests that they performed on its nuclear capability did not go well. If we see something along this line, then we know this launch was in preparation for a development of a nuclear capability.
Let's say this is a success. Will they have new friends at that point?
I think they might have some friends that would like to see them not bothered. That would be specifically China and certainly Russia. Those are the two allies, more so China than Russia at this particular point.
Well, South Korea remains technically at war with North Korea. Obviously, they had a conflict that ended in the 1950s. It was a truce and not a peace treaty. What happens now if that launch takes place on Thursday between the two countries?
Well, it won't violate the truce. That was in 1953 where the truce was signed that they would immediately cease firing, and then they haven't had any confrontations except for small skirmishes, but certainly not, an exchange of any major conflict. But that would not violate it by itself. It would certainly violate the agreement that North Korea has with not developing a missile capability, and that would certainly turn the Western world against them as far as giving them the kind of foodstuffs that they're looking for when they claim their economy is rock bottom.
How concerned should we be at this point?
I think we should be concerned. This is definitely a step that would give them the capability to hit the United States either in Hawaii or Alaska, and we should be concerned about that.
Okay, and of course we're going to stay on top of the story. Let's turn our attentions to Syria. They had promised to stop fighting for the first time. Now tomorrow, Thursday by the way, is the deadline for a ceasefire. About 9,000 people have been killed so far. They're not calling it a civil war, but they're on the brink of a civil war at this point.
Absolutely, yeah. When you talk about the government conducting additional attacks as we speak, and tomorrow being the deadline for a ceasefire, it just does not bode well that they're going to have any respect for the agreement that was made. So I think it'll continue to deteriorate. Certainly a high possibility that you'd have a civil war. The difference between what we're seeing now and a civil war is you don't have an uprising of people who are not considered to be basically insurgents or rebels. It's when you have the general population against the government where you have a civil war, or different factions within the civil community against each other. So I think that's probably the next step.
You know, the two leaders, let's compare them real quickly, and I don't know if there are any similarities. You can tell us. Let's say Assad from Syria, Kim Jong-un, who we were just talking about, from North Korea. Military's kind of running things there. Assad's still the one calling the shots in Syria?
At this point, I think so. You still have a loyalty by its military to Assad, and therefore, from the best we can determine, he is calling the shots. He wants to come across as a peaceful guy. He wants to give, accommodations to those that are looking for some kind of a difference in the way they're treated and the way the government's run. But the bottom line is that the military will make its decision as to whether they continue to back him or not. The same thing happened in Egypt. When you have the military moving away from the leader, you will see that deteriorate and he'll go. And
we've talked about this for weeks now, how they keep parading him out in the nice suit with his wife. Yeah, they look like a couple that you would see out at a restaurant on a Saturday night.
The one thing that has hurt them in the past week or so is the financial constraints that they've placed on his ability to use money elsewhere around the world. And the one that hurt her specifically is her shopping capability somewhere else other than within Syria itself. And that that may have some impact on the rest of the country.
Okay.
Not her specifically, but the ability to transact money.
Okay, and of course we'll follow that as well. Here's the other one, kind of story we were talking about at the beginning, General. Violent crime across the country, including here in Rhode Island, has actually gone down. But we're seeing a disturbing trend where police officers, not just in Rhode Island, but throughout the country, the number of police officers killed has increased. According to the FBI, 72 police officers were killed last year. That's a 25% increase. And kind of the scary thing looking at this, General, is the FBI can't pinpoint what is going on. What do you think?
You're actually right on. The reason that they can't pinpoint it is because there are several major factors involved. First, the methodology that New York used to place more police officers in the community and to confront those that would seemingly be armed has exacerbated itself into the smaller cities, giving more possibility and more liability on behalf of the officers being subjected to perpetrators by shooting at them and obviously killing them. The second reason is that we have seen across the nation a definite decrease in the amount of officers on duty because of budgetary concerns.
And we're seeing that right here in Rhode Island.
Right here in Rhode Island, you see it, and you'll probably see more of that. And I think the third thing I think has much to do with a seemingly deterioration of a respect for law and respect for those that serve in uniform, and starting with our elected officials and going right down through the ranks of what used to be, a really respected position, which was a police officer. So when you start that kind of deterioration, you see disrespect, it undoubtedly will result in someone taking a police officer's life that even 10 years ago would have really had someone hesitate before they pull that trigger.
And we saw a police officer killed in Massachusetts this week. He was going to a funeral, as a matter of fact, to be part of an honor guard. One more thing quickly, General, before we get out. The General Assembly is looking for a revision on the fire code. You sat on that committee back in 2003, right?
Yeah, I sat on that committee that created the fire code. And at that time, we have to keep in mind that the emotion was very high on ensuring that we'd never see another station fire. I think, in retrospect, as many of us do, that perhaps it was too constraining. It really cost a lot of businesses to go out of business because they just couldn't afford to outfit their businesses with the kind of fire suppression systems that are required by the code. I think now they're looking at it and saying, well, those that were either should have been grandfathered or given more time to comply is the way I think you'll see the code change to some extent, giving more leniency, if you will, to the time frame that they should comply, and especially to religious institutions, giving them the ability to make their own decision in places of worship, obviously.
What time code are you looking at here? Because there are some, 1025 Club is a perfect example in Johnston. They left. That was one of the reasons why. What's the time frame there that you're looking at?
They're probably looking at, well, I think they'll set the stage, giving the ability for people to come in and look for waivers, perhaps, or look for some kind of application of the new code. I would say you're looking at maybe 3 to 5 years before you see any kind of real impact being had on the community as it relates to the economics of having to come with fire suppression systems under the existing code.
All right. General Centracchio, as always, thank you for your thoughts.
Good to be here.
Thanks for watching.